3 weeks after establishing their base on Kepler-7, the team had grown from 4 people to over 30. Scientists, engineers, former military personnel, and volunteers from across the Free Cities had joined what was becoming known as the Aurora Resistance. The abandoned research station had been transformed into a bustling headquarters, with expanded laboratories, communication centers, and planning facilities. Elena had become the heart of the operation, working tirelessly to analyze the Aurora protocol data and develop new genetic modification procedures. Her research had yielded remarkable results. Simplified procedures that could grant radiation immunity to adult volunteers, though the process was more dangerous and less comprehensive than the childhood modifications she had received. The adult immune system resisted genetic changes, she explained during a briefing to Resistance leadership. But I've developed a staged approach that can overcome that resistance. The success rate is about 70%, and the volunteers retain most of their normal human characteristics while gaining the ability to survive on Earth's surface. Dr. Amanda Ross, who had relocated from Freehaven to oversee the medical aspects of the program, studied Elena's research with obvious excitement. This could change everything. If we can create a population of radiation-immune individuals, we can establish permanent settlements on the surface. How many volunteers will we need for a viable population? Asked Colonel Sarah Martinez, a former military officer who had taken charge of the Resistance's strategic planning. A few hundred to start, Elena replied. Enough to establish multiple settlements in different regions, with sufficient genetic diversity to ensure long-term viability. And how long would it take to process that many volunteers? With our current equipment, about 6 months. But if we could establish additional facilities, we could process volunteers in parallel and reduce the timeline significantly. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from Dr. Crawford in Sanctuary. His image appeared on the main display screen, his expression grim. "We have a problem," he announced without preamble. "Our contacts in New Geneva have reported unusual activity in the council chambers. They're mobilizing security forces and implementing new restrictions on intercity travel." "Do they know about us?" Wren asked. "We're not sure, but something has definitely spooked them. More troubling, our contact in the medical sector reports that they've been receiving requests for genetic samples from the general population, blood, tissue, even reproductive cells." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. They're starting their own modification program. "That's what we think," Crawford confirmed. "And if they're using the Aurora protocol data, they might have capabilities we don't know about." Colonel Martinez leaned forward. "What kind of capabilities?" "Enhanced physical strength, improved reflexes, maybe even psychological modifications that would make their subjects more compliant and loyal," Elena said, scrolling through sections of the Aurora protocol data she hadn't shared before. The research included work on behavioral genetics, ways to modify personality traits and emotional responses. "They could create a slave army," Sarah breathed. "Enhance humans who are programmed to obey the council without question. We need to accelerate our timeline," Wren decided. "How quickly can we get the first batch of volunteers through the modification process?" "I could start within days if we have volunteers," Elena replied. "But the process requires specialized equipment and a sterile medical environment." "Then we build what you need," Colonel Martinez said. "We've identified several abandoned facilities on the surface that could be converted into medical centers. With radiation-immune personnel to oversee the construction, we could have multiple facilities operational within weeks." As the meeting continued, Elena found her attention drawn to a section of the Aurora protocol data she hadn't fully explored. Files labeled Project Prometheus. Unlike the other research, which focused on adaptation and survival, Prometheus appeared to be concerned with enhancement and augmentation. "There's something else," she said, interrupting the tactical discussion. "Something I just found in the deepest layers of the data. They weren't just trying to create humans who could survive radiation. They were trying to create humans who could control it." She brought up the Prometheus files on the main display, showing genetic modifications that went far beyond simple immunity. The procedures described in the files would allow modified individuals to actively manipulate radioactive energy, using it to power technological devices, or even as a weapon. "Weaponize humans," Torres said quietly. They were creating living weapons. And if the Council has access to this data, Colonel Martinez added, they might already have such weapons at their disposal. The implications were terrifying. Enhanced humans who could survive on the surface were one thing. Humans who could control radiation as a weapon were something else entirely. The balance of power between the free cities and the Council could be even more precarious than they'd realized. We need to find the other research facilities, Elena said with growing urgency. If there are other enhanced individuals out there, we need to reach them before the Council does. I've been working on that, Sarah said, pulling up a map of the pre-flare world marked with red dots. Based on the Aurora Protocol data, I've identified the locations of all 12 research facilities. 7 reported successful modifications, but we need to verify which sites might still have survivors. The map showed sites scattered across the globe, facilities in North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Some were in areas that had been completely devastated by the flare, but others were in regions that might have provided some protection. The Australian facility was built into an underground cave system, Sarah noted. Natural radiation shielding. If any of the research staff or subjects survived, they might still be there. The European site was constructed inside a mountain, Elena added, studying the data. Similar protection. But the Asian facilities were on the surface. They probably didn't survive the initial radiation burst. So we focus on the sites with the best survival potential. Colonel Martinez decided. How we get there? Long-range atmospheric transports, Torres said. I can modify the Wander for extended flights, but we'd need fuel depots and supply caches along the route. The free cities could provide support, Dr. Crawford suggested over the communication link. We have trade relationships with survivor communities around the world. They could establish supply bases. As they planned the expeditions to locate other enhanced individuals, Elena continued her research into the Prometheus protocols. What she found in the deepest files made her question everything she thought she knew about the Aurora project. The radiation immunity wasn't the real goal, she announced during an emergency briefing 2 days later. It was just the first phase. According to these files, the ultimate objective was to create humans who could survive the transformation of Earth into something else entirely. What do you mean? Ren asked. Elena brought up a series of projections and models from the Prometheus files. They were planning to deliberately increase Earth's radiation levels even beyond what the solar flare accomplished. They wanted to create a world where only enhanced humans could survive, where normal humans would be eliminated by the environment itself. Genocide by environmental manipulation, Dr. Ross said, horrified. And they're not finished, Elena continued. These models suggest they plan to deploy additional radiation sources around the planet. Artificial devices that would increase background radiation to lethal levels for unmodified humans. When Colonel Martinez demanded, Elena scrolled through the timeline data. The projection suggests an implementation window beginning approximately 40 years after the initial flare. That means they could start within the next few years, Sarah finished. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. The Council wasn't just planning to control humanity's future. They were planning to eliminate everyone who couldn't survive in their enhanced world. We have to stop them, Elena said quietly. Not just for the sake of the enhanced individuals, but for everyone. If they succeed with this plan, billions of people in the Sky Cities will die. Then we're not just fighting for freedom, Colonel Martinez observed. We're fighting for survival. Over the following days, the Resistance's preparations took on a new urgency. Elena worked around the clock to complete the first batch of modification procedures, while engineering teams prepared for expeditions to locate other research facilities. Communication networks were established with survivor communities around the world, creating a global intelligence network that could track Council activities. The first volunteers for Elena's modification procedures were a mix of scientists, engineers, and former military personnel, people with the skills needed to establish and defend surface settlements. The process itself took place in a converted laboratory bay on Kepler-7, with Elena personally overseeing each procedure. The genetic modifications will take several days to fully integrate, she explained to the first volunteer, a former atmospheric engineer named David Kim. You'll experience some discomfort as your cellular structure adapts, but the radiation immunity should be effective immediately. The procedure involved a series of gene therapy injections combined with targeted radiation exposure to trigger the cellular changes. Elena had refined the process based on her own modifications, making it safer and more predictable than the original Aurora Protocol procedures. How will I know it's working? David asked as Elena prepared the first injection. Your skin will begin to show a faint luminescence, Elena replied. Nothing as dramatic as mine, but enough to indicate that your cells are processing radiation effectively. You'll also notice improved physical stamina and faster healing. The first procedure was a complete success. Within hours, David's skin showed the telltale glow of radiation processing, and his medical scans confirmed that his cells were adapting to handle gamma radiation as an energy source. More importantly, he showed no signs of the cancer and cellular damage that had plagued the original adult test subjects. It worked, Dr. Ross announced to the assembled resistance members. We have our first adult-modified volunteer. Cheers erupted throughout the station, but Elena remained focused on the data. One success didn't guarantee the procedure would work for everyone, and they needed a much larger sample size to be confident in their approach. We need to accelerate the program, she told Colonel Martinez. If the Council is planning to implement their environmental modifications within a few years, we need hundreds of enhanced individuals ready to oppose them. How fast can we process volunteers? Martinez asked. With our current setup, maybe 20 per week. But if we can establish surface facilities with proper equipment, we could process hundreds simultaneously. Then that's our priority, Martinez decided. We establish surface bases, begin mass modifications, and locate the other enhanced individuals before the Council can implement their final solution. As plans crystallized for the next phase of their resistance, Elena found herself thinking about Dr. Morrison and his final words about being a bridge between the world that was and the world that would be. She was beginning to understand what he meant. She wasn't just a survivor of the old world's destruction, but creator of the new world's possibilities. The question was whether they would have enough time to build that new world before the Council destroyed what remained of the old one. The attack came at dawn, just as Elena was completing the modification procedure on their 15th volunteer. Alarms blared throughout Kepler-7 as proximity sensors detected incoming aircraft, sleek, black vessels that moved with a speed and agility that exceeded anything in the Free City's fleets. Council forces. Colonel Martinez announced over the station's communication system. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Elena quickly completed the final injection sequence while Dr. Ross prepared their volunteer for immediate evacuation to the shielded medical bay. Through the laboratory's viewport, she could see the attacking craft. 6 angular fighters that seemed to shimmer with an energy field that made them difficult to track visually. How did they find us? Wren demanded as he arrived in the laboratory, carrying a plasma rifle and wearing combat armor. The quantum encryption was supposed to be unbreakable, Sarah added, her face pale with shock and confusion. Elena studied the attacking craft through the viewport, noting their unusual energy signatures. They're not tracking our communications, she realized. They're tracking me. What do you mean? The energy field around those ships, it's tuned to detect the specific radiation signature of Aurora Protocol modifications, Elena explained, her luminescent skin pulsing with agitation. They've developed technology that can track enhanced individuals. The station shuddered as the first weapon's impact struck the outer hull. The Council forces were using some kind of directed energy weapon that seemed designed to disrupt electronic systems rather than cause immediate structural damage. They want us alive, Colonel Martinez observed over the communication system. They're trying to disable the station, not destroy it. They want the Aurora Protocol data, Elena said. And they want me. They're not getting either, Wren said grimly, checking his weapon's power cell. Sarah, how long until the evacuation ships arrive? The Wanderer and 2 support craft are en route from Freehaven, Sarah replied, monitoring her communication console. ETA 15 minutes. We need to hold them off until then, Martinez said. All defensive teams, prepare for boarding action. The Council forces had moved into position around the station, their ships maintaining a perfect formation that suggested either exceptional pilot skill or automated control systems. Elena watched through the viewport as one of the craft extended mechanical appendages that looked suspiciously like boarding tubes. "They're coming aboard," she announced. The next few minutes were chaos. The Council boarding teams cut through the station's hull with precision tools, entering through carefully selected access points that suggested detailed knowledge of the station's layout. Elena and her companions retreated deeper into the station's core, carrying the Aurora Protocol data and the medical samples from their modification program. "The central laboratory is the most defensible position," Colonel Martinez said as they took up positions behind overturned workbenches and equipment cabinets. "We make our stand here." The attacking force moved through the station with military precision, their footsteps echoing through the corridors as they systematically cleared each section. Elena could hear voices, calm, professional, speaking in clipped phrases that suggested advanced tactical coordination. "Contact front," someone called out as the first Council soldiers entered the laboratory. They were wearing full environmental suits with advanced helmet displays, and they moved with the fluid grace of enhanced individuals. "Enhanced soldiers," Elena whispered. "They've already implemented their own modification program." The firefight that followed was brief but intense. The Council forces had superior numbers and equipment, but the Resistance fighters knew the station's layout and had prepared defensive positions. Plasma bolts filled the air, scorching walls and equipment as both sides sought cover and tried to gain tactical advantage. Elena found herself crouched behind a quantum computer console, watching the battle unfold around her. She could see the Council soldiers clearly now. They moved too fast, reacted too quickly, and showed no signs of fatigue even under heavy fire. They weren't just enhanced for radiation immunity. They'd been improved in every conceivable way. "We can't hold them much longer," Martinez called out as another defensive position was overrun. "The evacuation ships are 2 minutes out," Sarah reported, "but they'll never be able to dock with Council forces controlling the outer sections." Elena made a decision that would change everything. Rising from her cover, she called out to the attacking soldiers in a voice that carried clearly across the laboratory. "I'm Elena Vasquez. I know you're here for me. Let's talk." The weapons fire ceased immediately, and a figure in a command suit stepped forward. When the helmet retracted, Elena found herself looking at a woman who appeared to be in her 30s, with the same luminescent skin and enhanced features that marked her as an Aurora Protocol subject. "Dr. Elena Vasquez," the woman said in a cultured voice with a slight accent Elena couldn't place. "I am Commander Victoria Chun, Council Security Division. You're under arrest for theft of classified research materials and conspiracy against the legitimate government of the Sky Cities." "Legitimate government?" Elena laughed, her skin flaring brighter with emotion. "You mean the people who murdered 8 billion humans and planned to kill millions more?" "I mean the people who saved our species from extinction," Chin replied calmly. The solar flare was inevitable. The Council's only crime was preparing for survival, instead of dying with the unworthy masses. The flare was artificially triggered. Elena shot back. "Your Council murdered my world." For the first time, Chen's composed expression flickered with something that might have been doubt. "That's impossible. The flare was a natural phenomenon. The evidence is in the Aurora Protocol files," Elena said, pressing her advantage. "Nuclear devices in the solar corona, artificial destabilization of magnetic field lines. Your own people documented their crime." "You're lying," Chin said, but there was less certainty in her voice. "Then let me show you," Elena offered. "The data is right here. Look at it yourself and tell me I'm lying." Chen hesitated, clearly weighing her orders against her curiosity. Around the laboratory, the other Council soldiers waited, their weapons trained on the Resistance fighters, but not firing. "Commander," one of the soldiers said, "our orders are to secure the subject and the research data." "I know what our orders are," Chin snapped. Then to Elena, "You have 1 minute to show me this evidence." Elena moved slowly to the main computer terminal, aware that dozens of weapons were tracking her every movement. She called up the deepest files from the Aurora Protocol database, the classified sections that documented the artificial triggering of the solar flare. "Project Solarstorm," she said, highlighting the relevant files. "Deployment of fusion devices to the solar corona, calculated to trigger a massive coronal mass ejection. Launch date, 3 days before flare. Chin studied the data, her enhanced eyes scanning through the documents with superhuman speed. Elena watched her expression change from skepticism to horror as the evidence mounted. "This can't be real," Chin whispered. "Every piece of data is authenticated," Elena said. "Time stamps, digital signatures, even the financial records showing how the operation was funded." "But why?" Chin asked. "Why would they do this?" "To create a new world order," Elena replied. "To eliminate everyone except their chosen survivors and rebuild civilization according to their vision." The sound of approaching ships grew louder, and Elena could see the Wanderer and its escorts through the laboratory's viewports. But Chin seemed oblivious to everything except the data scrolling across the computer screen. 37 years, Chin said quietly. "I've spent 37 years believing I was serving the saviors of humanity." "You can still serve humanity," Elena offered. "Help us stop them from completing their plan." Chin looked up from the computer screen, her luminescent skin flickering with internal conflict. Around the laboratory, the other council soldiers were growing restless, clearly unsure what to do in the absence of clear orders from their commander. "Commander Chun," one of them said, "the evacuation ships are preparing to dock. Do we engage?" Chin stared at Elena for a long moment, then turned to her soldiers. "Stand down. Let them dock." "Ma'am." "I said stand down." Chen's voice carried an authority that immediately silenced any protests. "We're taking new prisoners back to New Geneva. The council will want to question them personally." It was a lie. Elena realized, a way for Chin to avoid having to choose sides immediately while giving the resistance time to escape. Elena quickly copied the most damning evidence files to a portable storage device, while Chen's soldiers reluctantly lowered their weapons. "Thank you," Elena said quietly as the evacuation teams from the Wanderer entered the laboratory. "Don't thank me yet," Chen replied. "This evidence changes everything. But it doesn't change the fact that the Council has enhanced soldiers, advanced technology, and control of most of the Sky Cities. Your resistance is still outnumbered and outgunned. But we're not alone anymore," Elena pointed out. "And we're not fighting for power. We're fighting for survival." As the evacuation proceeded, Elena found herself thinking about the war that was now inevitable. The Council had revealed their hand by attacking Kepler-7, and their enhanced soldiers proved they had capabilities the Resistance had only guessed at. But they'd also gained something equally valuable: proof that not all the Council's enhanced individuals were willing to follow orders blindly. The Wanderer detached from the station just as Council reinforcements arrived, slipping away into the cloud layer with its precious cargo of refugees and research data. Behind them, Kepler-7 fell under Council control, but the knowledge they gained it would fuel the Resistance for years to come. "Where to now?" Torres asked as they descended toward the clouds. "The surface," Elena replied, looking down at the irradiated wasteland that had once been home to billions of people. "It's time to start building our new world." As they broke through the cloud layer and the devastated Earth spread out below them, Elena felt a sense of purpose that transcended her personal survival. The war for humanity's future had begun, and she intended to make sure the right side won, even if it meant facing an enemy with powers that matched her own. The only question was whether they could build their army of enhanced humans fast enough to stop the Council from implementing their final solution. Time was running out, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Below them, the ruins of the old world waited to become the foundation of the new. 6 months after the attack on Kepler-7, Elena stood on the observation deck of New Eden, humanity's first permanent settlement on Earth's surface since the great solar flare. The city was still small, barely 3,000 inhabitants, but was growing rapidly as more enhanced individuals completed the modification procedures and joined the surface colonies. The settlement had been built in the ruins of Old Denver, using a combination of pre-flare structures and new radiation-resistant materials developed by the Resistance's engineers. Bioluminescent plants provided both lighting and air purification, their enhanced genetics allowing them to thrive in a high-radiation environment while processing toxins from the atmosphere. "The agricultural sectors are exceeding projections," reported Dr. Martinez, Elena's newly appointed Director of Colonial Development. Maria Martinez was the younger sister of Colonel Martinez, and one of the first successful adult modifications. Her expertise in sustainable farming had been crucial to establishing food production on the contaminated surface. What about the other settlements? Elena asked, reviewing reports from the Resistance's expanding network of surface colonies. New Sydney is approaching 2,000 inhabitants, and New Tokyo is just over 1,500, Maria replied. The European settlements are smaller. New London has about 800 people, and New Paris is still under construction. Elena nodded, pleased with progress, but aware how vulnerable they remained. The Resistance now had approximately 12,000 enhanced individuals scattered across 6 continents, but the Council controlled over 1 million people in the Sky Cities, many of whom had undergone their own version of genetic modification. Any word from Commander Chin? Elena asked. Her last report was 3 days ago, Maria said. She's managed to extract 17 more Council soldiers who are willing to join us after learning the truth about the solar flare. But she says the Council leadership is becoming suspicious of the defections. Commander Victoria Chun had proven to be one of the Resistance's most valuable assets, working as a double agent within the Council's military structure while secretly recruiting enhanced soldiers to their cause. Her intelligence reports had allowed the Resistance to avoid several Council attacks and had provided crucial information about the enemy's capabilities. The Council is accelerating their timeline, Elena said, studying intelligence reports on her tablet. Our sources suggest they're preparing to deploy the radiation amplification devices within the next 2 years. Can we stop them? Not with our current numbers, Elena admitted. But we're not just building resistance anymore. We're building a new civilization. If we can establish enough surface settlements and modify enough volunteers, we might be able to survive what the Council is planning. A communication alert interrupted their discussion. Elena activated the quantum encrypted channel, and Dr. Crawford's image appeared on the observation deck's main display. Elena, we have a situation, he said without preamble. Our expedition to the Australian research facility has made contact with survivors. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. They'd been searching for other Aurora Protocol survivors for months, but most of the research facilities have been destroyed or abandoned. How many? 43 enhanced individuals, including the original research team leader, Crawford replied. Dr. Sarah Kim survived the initial flare and has been continuing the research for decades. But that's not the most important discovery. What do they find? Crawford's expression grew grave. They've developed a way to reverse the genetic modifications. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. Reverse them? You mean turn enhanced individuals back into normal humans? More than that, Crawford said. They've developed a retroviral treatment that can strip away any genetic modifications, including the Council's enhanced soldiers. It could level the playing field. Or it could be used as a weapon, Elena realized. If the Council gets their hands on this technology, they could force our people back to baseline human genetics, making them vulnerable to radiation again, Crawford confirmed. Dr. Kim has agreed to share the research, but only if we can guarantee her people's safety. Elena made a quick decision. I'm going to Australia personally. We need that research, but we also need to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Elena, it's too dangerous, Maria protested. The Council has been tracking enhanced individuals. If they detect you making a long-range flight, then I'll take precautions, Elena replied. But this is too important to delegate. If there's a way to neutralize the Council's enhanced soldiers, we need it. The flight to Australia took 3 days, with the Wanderer making careful detours to avoid Council patrol routes. Elena used the time to study the preliminary reports from the Australian facility, marveling at the work Dr. Kim and her team had accomplished in complete isolation. Unlike Elena's own research, which focused on creating new modifications and improving existing ones, Dr. Kim had concentrated on understanding the fundamental mechanisms that control genetic expression. Her team had developed techniques for precisely editing genetic sequences, including the ability to remove specific modifications while leaving the rest of an individual's genome intact. It's like having a genetic reset switch, Elena murmured, reviewing the technical specifications. They could potentially reverse any modification ever created. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Torres asked from the pilot's seat. That depends on who controls it, Elena replied. The Australian facility was built into a natural cave system beneath Uluru, the massive rock formation in the center of the continent. The caves had provided perfect radiation shielding during the flare, allowing the research team to survive and continue their work. Over the decades, they'd expanded the facility into an underground city that rivaled anything in the Sky Cities. Dr. Sarah Kim met them at the main entrance, a woman in her 70s who showed the distinctive features of an original Aurora Protocol subject: luminescent skin, enhanced physical capabilities, and the subtle markers of genetic optimization. But unlike Elena, her modifications appeared more subtle, more integrated into her natural physiology. Dr. Vasquez, she said warmly, embracing Elena like a long-lost family member. It's wonderful to finally meet another survivor of the original program. Dr. Kim, Elena replied, your work on genetic reversal could change everything. It could also destroy everything, Kim said, her expression growing serious. Come, let me show you what we've learned. The Australian facility was a marvel of underground engineering, with laboratories, living spaces, and even recreational areas carved into the living rock. The research areas were equipped with technology that surpassed even what the Resistance had managed to assemble, including quantum computers and genetic sequencers that have been continuously upgraded over the decades. We've had 40 years to perfect our techniques, Dr. Kim explained as she led Elena through the facility. And we had the advantage of studying long-term subjects, people who've lived with the modifications for their entire lives. What have you learned? The modifications are more complex than the original researchers understood, Kim said, bringing up holographic displays that showed three-dimensional genetic structures. They don't just change individual genes. They create new regulatory networks that control how genes interact with each other. Elena studied the displays, recognizing some of the patterns from her own research, but seeing new layers of complexity she'd never noticed. The modifications are self-reinforcing, she realized. Exactly. Once implemented, they become part of the body's natural regulatory system. That's why they're so stable and why they continue to improve over time, Kim confirmed. But it also means that removing them is incredibly complex. How complex? Dr. Kim led her to a laboratory where several of her colleagues were working with tissue samples and computer models. We've developed a retroviral treatment that can identify and neutralize specific modification sequences, but the process takes weeks and requires constant medical monitoring. And there are risks. What kind of risks? Genetic shock, Kim said simply. When you remove modifications that have been integrated for years or decades, the body sometimes doesn't know how to function without them. We've lost 3 volunteers to systemic organ failure. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The genetic reversal technology was potentially powerful, but it was also extremely dangerous. In the wrong hands, it could be used as a weapon more deadly than any conventional armament. There's something else, Dr. Kim continued. We've detected artificial genetic sequences in some of the enhanced individuals we've studied, modifications that don't appear in the original Aurora Protocol specifications. What kind of modifications? Control sequences, Kim said grimly. Genetic triggers that could be activated remotely to influence behavior, suppress certain capabilities, or even cause death. We think the Council has been implanting these in their enhanced soldiers. The implications were terrifying. If the Council could remotely control their enhanced individuals, they had a weapon that could devastate the Resistance from within. Elena thought about Commander Chun and the other defectors, wondering if any of them carried these hidden control sequences. Can you detect these artificial sequences? Elena asked. With the right equipment, yes. And we can remove them, though the process is risky, Kim replied. But Elena, there's something else you need to know. We've been monitoring communication signals from the Sky Cities, and we've detected preparations for a major Council operation. What kind of operation? Dr. Kim brought up a new display showing signal intercepts and decoded communications. They're planning to deploy the radiation amplification devices within 6 months. But that's not the worst part. They're also planning to use the genetic reversal technology as a weapon. Elena's blood ran cold. How? They weaponized it into an aerosol delivery system, Kim explained. They planned to release it over the surface settlements, stripping away your people's radiation immunity and leaving them vulnerable to the amplified radiation. That would be genocide, Elena whispered. Total genocide, Kim confirmed. They could eliminate every enhanced individual on the surface while protecting their own people in the sky cities. Elena stared at the intelligence data, trying to process the scope of the Council's plan. They weren't just planning to control humanity's future. They were planning to eliminate every human being who couldn't serve their vision of genetic perfection. We have to stop them, she said. With what? Dr. Kim asked. They have superior numbers, advanced technology, and control of the sky cities. Your surface settlements are scattered and vulnerable. Then we change the game. Elena decided. We don't fight them on their terms. We fight them on ours. Over the next several days, Elena worked with Dr. Kim and her team to develop a comprehensive strategy. They couldn't match the Council's military might, but they had advantages the Council didn't: a distributed network of settlements that couldn't be easily destroyed, a population adapted to surface survival, and most importantly, the moral authority that came from fighting for freedom rather than control. We're not just building a resistance, Elena announced during a quantum-encrypted communication with all the resistance leaders. We're building humanity's future, and we're going to make sure it's a future worth living in. The war for Earth's surface was about to enter its final phase, and Elena was determined that when the dust settled, it would be the children of the new Earth who inherited the world, not the architects of its destruction. 5 years later, Elena stood on the highest tower of New Geneva, not the Council Sky City, but the new settlement they'd built on the Colorado Plateau, named in honor of the first Sky City to join the resistance. The morning sun cast long shadows across a landscape that was green and growing, where enhanced plants and carefully engineered ecosystems were slowly healing the wounds left by the great solar flare. The war was over. It had ended not with a great battle, but with a choice. When the Council had finally deployed their radiation amplification devices, they discovered that the surface settlements had already evacuated to deep underground facilities, caves and tunnels that Elena's people had been preparing for years. And when the Council had tried to use their weaponized genetic reversal technology, they'd found their own enhanced soldiers turning against them, finally free from the control sequences that Dr. Kim's team had quietly removed. The Council's final gambit had been their downfall. In trying to eliminate the surface settlements, they'd made the sky cities uninhabitable for anyone who wasn't genetically enhanced. The ordinary citizens of the sky cities, the vast majority of the population, had faced a choice: undergo genetic modification or die from radiation exposure. Most had chosen modification. Status report? Elena asked Sarah, who had become her chief administrator for the new settlement. The integration process is proceeding smoothly, Sarah replied. The former Sky City residents are adapting well to surface life, and enhanced modifications are taking hold without major complications. Elena nodded, pleased but not surprised. The genetic modification procedures had become routine over the years, refined through thousands of successful implementations. What had once been an experimental procedure was now as safe and reliable as any medical treatment. What about the Council leadership? The last of them surrendered 3 months ago, Sarah said. They're being held in the rehabilitation facility outside New Sydney, undergoing psychiatric evaluation and re-education. Elena had insisted on rehabilitation rather than execution, despite the magnitude of their crimes. The enhanced individuals who had perpetrated the great solar flare and its aftermath were still human beings, and Elena believed that understanding and redemption were possible even for the worst criminals. And the other settlements? Thriving, Sarah said with a smile. The global population of enhanced individuals now exceeds 2 million, spread across 47 permanent settlements on 6 continents. The ecosystem restoration projects are ahead of schedule, and we're seeing the return of modified wildlife to many regions. Elena walked to the tower's edge, looking out over the valley where New Geneva sprawled in organized harmony with the landscape. The city was built using principles of ecological integration, with living buildings that processed waste and generated energy, transportation systems that move with the natural flow of the terrain, and manufacturing facilities that produce no toxic byproducts. Dr. Morrison would have been proud, she said quietly. He would have been amazed, Sarah corrected. What we built here goes beyond anything he could have imagined. It was true. The post-war world had become something unprecedented in human history, a global civilization of enhanced individuals who lived in harmony with their environment rather than dominating it. The genetic modifications had given them not just survival capabilities, but a deeper connection to the natural world that influenced everything from architecture to agriculture. Elena, a voice called from behind them. She turned to see Maria Martinez approaching, now serving as a director of the Global Settlement Council. We've received a communication from the Deep Space Monitoring Station. What kind of communication? Signal intercepts from beyond the solar system, Maria said, her expression excited. We think we detected transmissions from other star systems, evidence of technological civilizations. Elena felt a familiar thrill of discovery. Even after all they'd accomplished on Earth, the universe still held infinite mysteries to explore. And now, for the first time since the great solar flare, humanity was in a position to reach toward the stars again. How long until we can respond? She asked. The engineering teams estimate we could have a deep space communication array operational within 2 years, Maria replied. And if we pool resources from all the settlements, we might be able to build an interstellar probe within a decade. Elena smiled, thinking about the future that stretched ahead of them. Humanity had survived its greatest crisis and emerged stronger, more capable, and more unified than ever before. The children of the new Earth were ready to become children of the stars. Then let's get started, she said. As the sun rose higher over New Geneva, casting its light on a world reborn, Elena felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The dark chapter of human history that had begun with the great solar flare was finally closed, and a new chapter, one filled with hope, discovery, and unlimited potential, was just beginning. The future belonged to all of them now, and it was going to be extraordinary.